So my name's Kevin Mealy. I'm the Director of Sales Engineering here. Basically, my team works on the pre-sale side. We interact with a lot of the prospects and current customers. We literally take folks through the products. We give them demonstrations. We help them configure the products, get them installed. So a lot of these use cases that you guys are talking about, we literally run into on a daily basis. Essentially, I used to be a customer. Been in the industry for about 20 years now, so for about half of that time I was basically a systems engineer, and I actually came over with the TechTools acquisition, so the storage manager product as you guys know it today. I came over with that acquisition, so I've been here for about 5 years now. So actually our acquisition I think was back in January of 2010. So I've had a lot of experience kind of with our acquisitions, our new products that we've come out with, and other products that we've actually kind of brought online. And it's really exciting actually to see how we've really started to kind of bring things together and tie them together. So essentially all of these products kind of brought together on top of the Orion platform really helps us to allow folks to really collaborate, right? So when we're talking about different admins, so you've got maybe your web application folks, or maybe your application like your Exchange admin, your SQL admin. You also might have, let's say, your systems folks. They're dealing with the Wintel or Unix systems, and then beyond that, you have your virtual admins, or your VM admins out there, and as well as your storage admins. So all of this really comes together and allows those folks to really kind of collaborate maybe on a problem that maybe they're experiencing. Maybe it's at the web layer, or maybe a user saying, hey, my application's slow, what's going on, right? So we think about, okay, where does that application lie? So the AppStack environment view really allows us to kind of see that information. We can actually filter on these specific items and basically narrow that field of vision down. We can even use this spotlight view over here on the right hand side to essentially take all the noise out of the picture, and that'll actually bring us to a view that will really kind of show us, let's see here, this is actually a beta site, by the way, just to let you all know that. I think maybe the browser's kind of giving us a little bit of a visual issue here with that pop-up. So essentially you can see here, so we've got the applications, the servers, and as we scroll down, we can even filter out the storage array that's associated, the LUNs that are out there, even any of the volumes that are associated with that application.
So we can expand all?
Yeah, we can do an expand all up there as well.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so kind of just bringing that through. So we can do a collapse all as well. We can even filter on specific things. So maybe there's a specific LUN or a specific VM. We can type that in. We can do a lot of different filters here. So there's up-down status in here. There's a lot of let's say threshold type statuses as well. So your criticals, your warnings. So maybe a virtual machine sitting in a warning state, or maybe in this case like we have our applications in a warning state. So hovering over this, you can see on the bottom, basically we're showing high read latency on the database side, right? So that high read latency potentially, typically would basically be, maybe that back-end disk, so that back-end storage that's associated to it. So in this example, if we kind of scroll down, we can look at other statuses like the server. We can see CPU memory health. It's kind of real quick. It's just a real quick, easy way to see, do I have a problem with the application, or do I have a problem somewhere else in the actual stack?
How are you gathering this information? Is it an agent or WMI query?
So let me kind of go over that just a little bit. So since we have different I'll say products, if you will, kind of sitting on top of the Orion layer, basically the way we gather this information is with the with the application layer here, let's say with SQL, SAM, or Server and Application Monitor, collects the data through WMI. We can also get some data through SNMP as well with that. But basically this is going to be WMI collection off the Windows server. We're also going to get that server information as far as the operating system data is concerned through WMI. And then beyond that, when we're going down into the different layers, if we're at the virtualization layer, let's say this is an ESX host, right? That's going to be through the VMware APIs. And then if it's Hyper-V, we're going to use WMI and PowerShell essentially to pull that data. And then when we get into the LUN layer, this is going to basically be being pulled through, depending upon the device, it might be SNMP, it might be SMIS, it might even be the API of the device, such as maybe NetApp. So there's different ways that we're actually collecting this information and then inserting it into the database.
But using generally native tools. You don't have an agent. You don't need to install.
So it's agentless. It is agentless.
So actually, Server Application Monitor, we are going to market this quarter with an agent to allow for flexibility as opposed to WMI or RPC fetching methodologies.
Okay, so is that just to be able to gather more information, for example, from SQL? I don't know if you can do WMI queries for, SQL queue lengths or that kind of thing.
In queries. So Server Application Monitor has different templates, and you can plug in queries depending on what type of data metrics you want to pull out from the database. It also supports the ability to run Perl or Python scripts as well to gather information about the application.
Okay.
And there's a lot of, just
Did you switch your mic on?
Oh, sorry.
for SQL in particular, you can also query SQL using SQL because
Right.
they maintain a bunch of system views that have a lot of data that is actually nowhere else, and so server and application monitoring can do that as well. But the agent has been added for. First of all, there's the whole question whether there are some people that are agent, and then there are people who can't stand agent, and so you have that war. But for us, it's really more about there are scenarios where an agent is really needed. There are environments sometimes where Windows is really, for some reason, the WMI connection that takes care, with the DCOM stuff, to go between two hosts. For some reason the environment is so screwed up that you can never figure out how to make it work. In that case, the agent is a great solution. The other part that this opens up for us is the road towards the cloud. So we are starting to see customers that have VMs running in Amazon or running in Azure, for instance, and so having a capability without having to drop a full-fledged poller in the cloud to actually do things within the cloud environment, but being able to drop an agent there and basically it to connect back to the on-premise side to actually communicate back with the Orion server is something that actually is a set of use cases that we're managing.
So there are different deployment models, but you're using native tools as much as you can.
Yes.
If you want additional stuff, you'll need an agent.
Correct.
Right.
Okay.
So are you going to integrate, so the QoE, for instance, the agent that's involved with that, will this agent you're talking about now, if I want to do an agent install, if I want to do agentless and then have an agent-based install, will the QoE piece be integrated with the agent?
It's going to be all
Or is it
in
gonna
one.
be
It'll be all the same. So
Yeah.
essentially, think of the agent as the platform, and then different modules, if you will,
Yeah.
That are
basically
pulling
run on
different
top of that
data
pull
metrics,
different things.
Yeah, I don't want to end up with. I don't want to end up with 5 different agents or 28, as we have 28 products with 28 different SolarWinds agents running on one machine.
Right.
If you're interested in all of our
I'll
products,
be able to remotely deploy that, obviously, like
Yes.
QoE.
Right.
Yes.
It'll all be identical. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to use those same mechanisms. And actually, before we go any further, what I'd like to do, just real quick, let's just kind of get a level set on what you guys are looking at here, because I know we talked about the different products and what this all is. Essentially, if you look up here in the top, there are these different tabs. So the home tab really encompasses like the Orion core, if you will. So that's that bottom layer. What's kind of common between all of these products, right? So that this environment is the actual AppStack environment that we're looking at right now. As you were talking about the quality of experience, right? The quality of experience is also part of that core. And that's another way we can kind of go through troubleshooting applications as well, like Nikki was talking about earlier. So when we get to the network tab, this is the network performance monitor. All right, so this literally gives you all of the response time, your network device monitoring. Applications refers to the server and application monitor product. Okay, again, this is all running on the same Orion core platform. So this is where we're gathering information about server hardware, we're gathering information about operating systems, and we're also able to monitor those applications, again, through those different mechanisms that we just talked about. Then we have our web performance monitor. This is where we're going out, taking maybe recording a transaction on a website or steps on a website, and we're basically playing that back for folks, right? They can basically deploy those out in the Amazon cloud, if you will, right? So that they get an idea how end users are actually, what the response time is or the experience is from outside of maybe their network. And then we get into storage. The storage tab here is actually referring to, as Joel was talking about, a product called Storage Resource Monitor. Okay, this is where we're actually taking the storage monitoring and pulling it into the Orion core. This is something that'll be coming out basically this quarter. We will have a subset of devices that are supported in Storage Manager today, but obviously, as you can see, we're trying to move more and more to this core platform. So this is a great way for us to start to integrate that storage, the virtualization, the web information, the applications, and obviously in this case we've got the virtualization layer where we do support Hyper-V and VMware. So, as we start connecting the dots, all of this within the AppStack starts to get populated, and then we start building those relationships like Joel was talking about.
Obviously, the next question is going to be, are you going to support KVM? And
On the roadmap.
Yeah, definitely. It's on the roadmap. No timelines, obviously.
And containers.
So we hear that a lot. We'll hear other ones as well that are out there. Obviously these are the most popular today, but they're definitely up and comers.
I like the AppStack idea and the name. That interface right there looks like SolarWinds from 1 or 2 years ago, or 2 or 3 years ago. So are you looking to maybe make this dashboard a little
Less ugly?
Yeah.
Tabby
I'm glad that you asked. Actually, we are spending quite a bit of time right now on 2 different initiatives. One of them is going to be more short term, and will basically be more of a just skinning it differently to look more modern. And cleaning up a little bit of the things that we can easily clean. And then we have another initiative that's going on right now, which is really about we have a very rich set of widgets right now in the product. When you have all the products installed, we have north of 750 widgets of data that you can actually have there. That's obviously a lot of data. And so our goal right now, the other initiative that we have is to actually, how do we combine those things so that, we make it easier to consume the data out of the box. So yes, we are definitely aware of the, of the UI, and we are working on that.
Can you show from a consuming data perspective, like we've got the SQL Server, it's got issues. Export to PDF, what does that look like? Is that ugly? Or does it actually show you relevant data? Because we'll show all the grayed out box. It's like, oh, thanks, PDF. I know
it's going to basically show what's on the screen. So
cops would do an export to PDF, and they would be 700 pages of useless information. I'm like, oh, CSV. All right, it's 1 page. It's everything I need.
Right. Yeah, this is more or less kind of doing a screen scrape, if you will, and just showing what's on the screen. So if we were to expand it and we exported the PDF, then we'd be able to see it.
So you'll maybe introduce like a reporting function that's actually useful, other than because I can do a screen cap as well. That's pretty easily
Sure,
done.
absolutely. Definitely understandable. In this case, we get the entire stack, right, and pretty much get the whole viewpoint of this. So maybe there's something that we want to bring to somebody to show them. Obviously, we can kind of narrow that field of vision down, if you will, and then show that.
Because it's easier than where I can do something like that as a function, as opposed to hover over one of those things which has some really great data and then actually do like a window S to screen cap that part. So I'm doing all the work that I think it should do natively on my own, so I can report it up to management or whatever the case is.
Sure. No, absolutely.
Yeah, and I would
Just for
like
this
the ability
example-
to export to CSV because in the SolarWinds stuff I've worked on, I've never been able to do that right from the UI, and sometimes it's faster to just build a pivot table.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in the reporting we can do some of that. But when it comes to obviously the things that you're kind of seeing on the screen, it would definitely be the export to PDF in this case.
Just in this example, the SQL Server has issues due to read and write latency. Why is that? What's causing the read and write latency?
So when we click on that and then we actually kind of scroll down through and we see the different layers of the stack, in essence it would be this LUN that's actually creating or causing that. Basically we can see that the total latency on the actual LUN is actually having a problem. And in this case, SQL's configured on RAID 5, which most people don't do.
Just to be honest, when you bring that up, there's nothing, even though it's a red triangle, I wouldn't necessarily know, I would know that 72 milliseconds of latency is a lot, but it doesn't, if you pop that up, it doesn't say,
It's not jumping out as saying this is actually the problem.
Yes.
Sorry, that's a much better
we
way
can
to say it.
drill into it further. I guess that's kind of what really the red triangle really is expressing, is that that's a critical threshold that's being met on that LUN. So the correlation between I've got read latency issues back down to the latency issues on the LUN itself. We kind of, I guess,
this could easily be a red herring because I've got 72 milliseconds latency, but I have 0 IOPS. So really, do I have latency? Is this actually the problem?
Wait
I don't know. It might not be the problem.
So think how long this would take you to discover if you didn't have a tool that was looking at.
I would have a tool. I would have a lot of different tools that would be collecting this data.
All right, so if you guys haven't, I'm not saying why don't you have this, because I don't expect most people have ever heard of it. But there's a guy named Brendan Gregg, who used to work very deeply in Solaris, has started working on Linux, doing things with dtrace, developed a visualization tool called a flame graph, where it's essentially a layered graph where each layer of the graph, and it ends up looking like a flame, that's why it's called flame graph, each layer dives more deeply into where a latency was caused and what system, subsystem underneath, and it instantly visualizes things like this. And it's a completely free technique, right? You can write it in a PowerShell script or in dtrace on your Mac, and it would be awesome for visualizing something like this. If you guys haven't looked into it, please do, because Brendan's a really brilliant guy, and he's got a lot of great ideas on monitoring and displaying.
And the flame would brand really nicely with SolarWinds.
Right, the orange flame.
So I've had this situation a lot. A lot of storage contention you can predict, right? You know that there'll be a login storm or a boot storm during these hours, during the start of the week or a financial close season. Sometimes you can't predict storage contention. SharePoint does a lot of indexing, and if somebody does a search across SharePoint, that might introduce a lot of contention on your array.
Right.
So would you be able to at least correlate that or show if one volume is being used a lot, the whole array can slow down if you've got a really converged small environment?
Sure. No, absolutely. I mean, if what we could do is we could actually double click on this LUN, and this takes us into the actual LUN itself. We can even take a step out further, but basically what we can do is we can see here the actual RAID group or storage pool. So then we can see basically other LUNs that are sitting on this particular storage pool. So we can see if another LUN is impacting other ones within that set of disks, essentially. Exactly, right?
Other VMs as well, that would be... Because we just looked in a particular SQL server.
Yep. So if we were looking at that in particular, we would be able to see here within the we'll call it the mini stack or the contextual view of the AppStack. So we've kind of brought that into these views. So then we could see other relationships, like what other servers essentially are potentially sitting on maybe this LUN. And then we could even kind of break that out further. If we went to the pool level, we could see what other VMs and data stores maybe are sitting on that same pool.
But we've got active alerts, LUN total latency greater than 20 milliseconds. That's awesome, because that is a problem in a SQL environment.
Right.
It's not telling me why. It's just telling me that's happening. I have absolutely no idea why.
Networking or storage?
Is it networking or storage?
Or
is it RAID 5? If it's always been running perfectly fine, I don't think it's RAID 5. Because if it was always below 20, and then out of nowhere it became above 20, our RAID group type didn't change overnight.
So here's the other thing we can do with this. We have the ability to baselining on performance.
I would assume that it's going to collect data analytics and over time determine this is what the baseline is in order to determine an anomaly.
So then we could take that information, take a baseline on the environment. If 20 is normal, then great, right? If it's not, then we can be alerted on it. But let's just say that 20 is normal. Then we could say
20 is a ceiling.
Right. No,
above 20, that's the problem.
It's high, right? I mean, anything
normal
over
is 8.
Yeah, so anything lower than, let's say, 10, right, is good, right? So we saw an anomaly where it went over 10 milliseconds. We could basically set an alert like that to where it would actually allow us to know, okay, this thing is out of the norm. Because that is something that we get questions about a lot. When we're on the phones with prospects and customers, we're talking to them about these things, and they're like, well, how do I know, like, what's normal, what's not normal? Well, with this product that'll be released this quarter, we'll be able to start telling them that information. We currently do that in Server and Application Monitor already. And Virtualization Manager, we just came out with that as well within this product too. So we're starting to go down that road to actually show the different anomalies that are happening in the environment. And we have to we just set that up in the background as far as like how we're going to monitor the environment. So if we want to monitor the baselines, we can. If we just want to look at true definitive, I'm hitting X milliseconds on latency or X IOPS, then we can do that as well.
And this may not be the best example because I don't get a good sense of what the cause is. I see the symptoms, I see what's actually occurring, but I can't see why is this actually the case. I feel like I want to dive into the architecture, see what is actually going on, is actually causing this. It looks like storage array actually is yellow there. It may be causing things to be red. We don't know. Directly in the room, we don't know the exact cause of the issue.
In this case, we've got like potential other potential issues. Right, so maybe IO size is too large. In this case,
CX3,
we've got
I think that's the problem.
Sick burn.
again, we're built in a lab environment. Some of this is
all
also
good.
beta, so we may have some other anomalies that
good.
we're not aware of either here.
A few years ago, to discover this kind of information, I'd have to go to a filer or a storage system and run my LUN stats, and then
I mean, it would
Right.
take
And
hours
I
to get to the point of
Exactly.
maybe just a false.
So, and I think that's really the point I'd like to be able to make here. You know, like you guys are kind of talking about here, is that getting to root cause will be a lot easier with having all of these different views and having everything kind of consolidated into one place, right? So, where before you would have to go to the storage vendor's view, you would have to go maybe to even our separate storage manager product alone, right? Now we're bringing it all together, we're tying all the data together, and we can see those different relationships, which again allows, if we're an IT generalist, right? That one person easily could see, okay, well, where do I need to start maybe where my problems are? I might not have a server issue, right? In this case, maybe I just have, my CPU memory loads are just fine on this server. So maybe that's just fine, right? I don't have to worry about that. I'm not going to focus on that. I'm going to focus on my LUN and I'm going to focus on my application to see what's going on there. So just to bring that together and to really kind of reduce that amount of time it takes to get to root cause, is really huge here.
You can immediately say server, probably not a problem. Volume, probably not a problem. Pool, probably not a problem. And you can focus on those items.
Right.
And that's the key. We're not trying to beat you up on this particular
I totally
problem.
understand. Absolutely.
But that's how much we care about the ability to get to the data is.
Absolutely.
You've done all the work. Great. Now I want to download an app on my phone. Boom. I don't want to have to go through and install an operating system on it.
Sure.
Nothing.
Sure.
No,
That's
it's the Android community.
Right.
It's part of the second effort that we are doing from a UI perspective that goes more in depth. It's not just about cosmetical things like changing the navigation. What we are also investing in inside is more of this concept of an incident workspace, so that when you have an alert, the idea is to get to a view that instead of being the node view that you would go to, like the LUN view, that it basically is tailored and bringing the pieces of information that if we know that the server, the volume, the pools are green, they are not the reason that then there's no need for us to bring that data in.
There's no sense in wasting our time looking at that.
Our goal is basically to bring the relevant piece of information that we believe will be interesting for you to diagnose this inside that custom view. But we had to ship something in Q1. And so that's the V1 of this. And then going forward, you're going to see more
and more intelligence coming.
More intelligence in the UI about that, yes.
Yeah, that would be the hope that we get there. And, again, we do have those questions all the time, with folks. So, I mean, it's a really good point. Really being able to kind of trace things, we can do that pretty easily.
What about, I'm sorry, go ahead.
As far as the app monitoring, is that where, can you drill down to the SQL as far as the database for bad queries? This query's causing the issue to cause
yes,
on the disk to
right.
Yes,
so we've got two. Yes. So there's two different ways we can do that. One is through our server and application monitor product. Okay, and I'll go to applications real quick, just to kind of give you guys kind of an overlay here. Basically what we have is we have our app insights, and I'll talk about this a little bit. The app insights essentially are kind of an all-encompassing, almost like a product within a product, but they're a feature within Server and Application Monitor. And I'll call them all-encompassing products to allow us to drill down into the different applications that we've got designated. Right now we've got SQL, Exchange, and then again, new to market, Q1 will be App Insight for IIS, so we can actually troubleshoot web application issues.
Oracle in there?
No Oracle today. However, there are Oracle templates, all right? So there's a concept of templates that's really a grouping of monitors that we can apply to an Oracle server and monitor it that way. But we also have our database performance analyzer tool that, or product that Joel was talking about, that is a separate product. However, it is more for the analytics of the database.
So Q2, Q3 we're talking about.
Unfortunately, I don't make those decisions.
So is all the data from each individual application shown within AppStack then? Or is there
So we can
value in
drill
going
into
to
the
other-
data. So that's where, it was a great question about, can we get into the application itself? So that's really where, if I were to go to MS SQL Server, this takes me to really a nice contextual view, an overall view of what's going on within the SQL application. Okay,
Right.
I would say this is a little bit more for monitoring than analytics. The analytics really would come in with the database performance analyzer tool, where we can get down to that query level. We can tell you if there's locking or blocking happening in SQL, and we can also do some correlation with a virtual environment. kind of as a side note, I was actually on a call with a prospect that was on the phone. They were having problems with their environment. Their SQL Server was slowing down. They couldn't figure out why things were slowing down. It was virtualized. It was in VMware. And essentially what happened was we ended up finding that within Database Performance Analyzer, that was kind of the product they were focusing on because we thought maybe it was a database issue. So we're looking at that, and Database Performance Analyzer kind of pointed to the virtual environment. So we said, okay, well let's get Virtualization Manager running. Let's look at that. Let's see what's going on. And basically, once we got that stood up, we were able to actually see that there were multiple VMs running on the same data store, and some of those VMs happen to be virtual desktops, which I can't believe how they set this thing up. Right? And it was running on the same. It basically was running on the same storage pool as that SQL Server, and it was every day. And these are people out, I think, in one of their South African offices. They'd log in at a certain time of day. And it was actually impacting the entire, storage array, or basically just that set of disks, that storage pool, and it was impacting the SQL Server too because it was running on that same system, right? So I mean, it was just, couldn't believe they set it up that way. But we were able to show them literally at the exact time that they were showing us that they were saying they were having the problem. They were able to actually provide that information and say, listen, this is your problem. You guys have to move this, this VDI data store off of this storage pool because it's just completely impacting what's going on here. So just kind of as a side note, we do use our products to help folks troubleshoot, and it tends to get pretty easily, right? And get there. So with this particular piece, the SQL Server, this is App Insight for SQL, right? So this again is, we would more or less kind of consider it a product within a product because it really does go after, runs a bunch of SQL queries against the database. There's some WMI in here. It just tries to pull a lot of information. But the thing is, you've got your active alerts on the right-hand side here, right? So any problems that may be happening on the SQL Server, real quick, real easy. Again, those are those latency issues that we're seeing within the database, right? We can also drill down into the individual databases if need be. And we can also see here, we can see there's read latency on each one of these databases. And they're all running on essentially that same, that's that same LUN. So that's why everything is really red in this particular example. But we can get down to the query level up here if we wanted to, or we can look at the different buffer size, the cache information, any latches and locks that are happening within the database or the SQL Server itself. And then from there, we can look at other statistics as well.
1 hour, 12 hour, 24 hour. Can you select that? A week.
Yeah, we can. So we can basically go 1 hour, 12 hour, 24 hour, and then in certain cases within these resources, we can actually set it differently. We can customize some of these things within the App Insights. Typically, it's kind of an all or nothing thing. So customizing this, we can do some customization, but not a ton of customization. We have other templates, device templates, and things like that we can do as well. We can also move these things around. So if there's other important things that you want to move around, you can do that too. The question? Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. How is this stored on the back end? Is it like a lossy representation where it's rolled up in intervals?
Yeah, so it basically keeps it keeps the raw data for I don't even remember what an hour, maybe something like, or a day.
It's configurable.
And then you can basically choose how many times, basically after how long does it roll up the data, hourly and then weekly, things like that. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
So earlier you talked about baselines. Does that apply to VMs as well? So let's say I deploy a VM. Can I apply a baseline to that? So that way, if my user comes back and say, hey, it's slow or something is not working, I can go back and see the changes that have occurred on that VM, even drill down deeper into the app on that VM?
Yeah, so basically we can set the baselines on those virtual machines and then set what threshold we may want to, what variance we want to look at, right? So if it goes 10% above that or whatever, we can set those up.
And where are those baselines stored?
So that information is all going to be stored in the database as well. Now what we'd have to do is we basically have to go into essentially the components that we're monitoring, and then we go into that individual components. So if we want to, maybe in one of these cases, I choose one of these particular instances where I want to go in and actually set up the baseline. I just go and edit that within the monitor itself, so it's kind of in the settings page. And then we can go in and actually say, okay, I want to baseline this metric. So maybe for the VM, I can say I want to baseline the CPU and memory. or maybe I want to baseline the I/O or the latency as well, right? So I can do some of those things too. But that's all kind of in the back end and the settings pages that we can actually go through and actually set those up.
Yeah. Now, do you keep it for? Is there like an interval of keep this baseline for so many days, months?
There
whatever?
is, and I want to. So I know after the first, basically it takes us 7 days essentially to kind of get that baselining data off of that system, right? And then from there we can basically tell it how long we keep the information. So all that is configurable as far as historical data is concerned.
Is there a maximum amount of time you can keep something? I mean, I've had different products collecting data about virtualization environments, and I could go back 2 years of, or in many cases, the life of the virtual machine. So I always saw what was going on throughout its entire life. And if I have visibility into SQL, 24 hours is great, but day 29, we're doing end of month billing or whatever the case is, and that thing gets spiked, and all of a sudden everything freaks out. But that's normal activity for day 29, which means I need to have a minimum of 60 days to identify anomalies.
Right, and
probably 90 though.
I don't know that we can go indefinite, but I know we can go at least 2 years on that information.
I'm starting to move all my stuff over from. I'm using Graphite right now for my trending, and I'm actually looking at building a Hadoop cluster for TSDB, time series database, which is basically just however long you need. Whatever, it just keeps adding because like Chris says, Christopher says, it's so common to have to be like, well, especially like I'm in academia, I want to know what it was last year at this time. How crazy is this compared to fall of a semester?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, because a lot of times you have like end of quarter processing or end of month processing.
Because that is one of the issues with any monitoring tool is the noise, and spurious alerts just drives everybody insane. So that kind of correlation of month-end processing, even though it's normal at 3%, and month-end it goes up to 96%, not a problem.
Or it's normal every month it spikes a little bit, but then you get quarter end and then it spikes up even more. But you could detect month, but then quarter it blows up, or year end.
Or I know when my backup flows are going to put a lot of load on the my stack, and I can plan ahead.
Yep.
It freaks out because there's a backup running, but that happens every week.
Right.
So it's like ignore.
I don't think we're complaining that you're not doing this. We just
clearly sympathizing.
Yeah. So I mean,
look at all use cases.
It is something that is something that we want to be able to do better, because every time basically what you're doing is you're trying to figure out what curve is fitting this distribution, and that's the hard part, is figuring out, okay, I'm looking at there are different type of distribution and the way they are kind of working over time also. And if you take storage, for instance, well, storage capacity is pretty much a step function. Over time capacity should go up. You can look at the rate of acceleration there. Yeah. But for a lot of those other things, like a logon storm will have a totally different profile of curve and distribution than a storage. And so I think the difficulty for us is to try to figure out which apply to which type of time series. And I think we are working on those type of things. It just takes I guess baby steps for us to integrate that into the product, as we are because to some extent for us, what we don't want to do is add a bunch of false positive or false negative to the product, because at that point it's even worse than an alert storm, because at that point people can't really trust your alerts at all. And so there's this kind of fine balance for us to kind of figure out, but we are definitely kind of investing. I think the thing that we have right now in place is basically based on 2 times standard deviation over the moving average for a lot of those things. That seems to work for a lot of the distributions that we have.
And the more information you collect, the better forecasting you get. But also there's times where we've got a backup going on, right? A large amount of network throughput, and you can, or storage throughput, and you're like, okay, that's not a problem. You have an internal security scan that's going on, and you see it spikes because there's a lot of network traffic. But then you have an internal hack going on, and you can get into a old sense of comfort to say, oh, it's probably just having a security scan going, because you normally correlate this box would be performing the scans, but if it's coming from somewhere else, and it's a matter of, still you have to kind of dive into there in order to see those activities going on. It makes it faster to see it, but still.
No, absolutely.
These are a lot of the challenges, especially today with security threats on the horizon.
That's why I brought up the machine learning piece, because it seems like this. I know this is a phrase and a term that a lot of people frown on, but it's like a big data problem, and you just want to dump all this stuff into like a NoSQL or an unstructured database and apply some logic and intelligence to it.
Analytics to it.
Yeah, and I think we want to do part of that by basically kind of going to this concept of when you have an incident, the way it should bubble up is to bring you the information that we believe is the most likely helpful in solving the problem.
It's about probabilities.
Exactly. And at that point, what we don't want to do is remove the step from you to actually make the decision. Yes, that's the root cause, but we want to get closer and closer at providing you the information to be able to take that decision. And not you having to kind of drill down into 50 different screens to actually kind of get to that.
If it takes me 2 hours to find out that there's a elephant flow backup going on while month end is closing, and this thing can tell me in 5 minutes, that'd be a big win.
Have you thought about allowing users to kind of customize their own whatever metrics they want to see versus kind of logging in and everything's kind of right there in front of them?
So, I mean, we definitely do. In the App Insights, it's a little different. But, you know, from the other application monitoring that we have within the product, you absolutely can do that. I mean, this is highly customizable when you get into here. So if we were monitoring, you know, if I go back out to applications here, you absolutely can customize these screens however you like. Let me just find one here. So like our Active Directory 2008 R2 services encounters, right? Any of this information that maybe we're monitoring for the system, all of these things can be customized. So if you want to look at this particular one, we can click on that. This is going to take us into a screen for all these different counters. But basically, these are all out of what we call a template. So you can turn these things off, and if there's things that you don't want to see and things that aren't important to you, you just turn it off. You don't even monitor it.
Okay.
So we can hide those things. We can unmanage them. It just makes it real easy.
I can monitor my Active Directory sites and services replication and all of that through here. I don't have to go and run DC dialog everywhere.
Right, exactly.
Now, is a baseline an explicit activity, or it just learns over time and determines, hey, this is a baseline based on your system?
So basically what we do is within the product, you kind of have to decide on what you want a baseline. Okay, so again,
it is an explicit activity. It just doesn't collect data and say.
Hey, Kevin, why don't you pull it up?
Yeah, so let's go into there.
Yeah, one other thing also while we are on kind of customizing is AppStack itself can be filtered to only the system that you care about. So basically, if you're in a large company and you're only responsible for 10 systems and the back-end infrastructure supporting those systems, you can literally filter just that view to actually look at those 10 systems and the systems behind them.
Well, ultimately, you want to distribute the monitoring of things, so your application owner can have a view just of their application and see something red due to a SQL Server, which is high latency. So, I mean, I don't see it obviously as just an infrastructure monitoring tool, but it's something you would hand over to the app owners so they have visibility of what's going on.
And I think going back to that incident workspace, the goal is that you could actually send them the alert. The alert would contain a URL to that workspace, and they can go and collaborate there with what the other people who have already looked at the problem have found out, basically.
That sounds dangerous.
Does it?
Letting app owners make decisions around infrastructure?
No, they don't make decisions. They just see what's going on there.
Once you give them visibility, it's like, it's the storage. We got to get new storage in here. I've met those app owners. That's what they do.
On one end, you want to. It's all about balance. On one end, you want to provide enough visibility, but too much visibility is also not good. So we have to find the right point.
But it's nice that it exists, and you have that ability to delegate that out as well. I mean, no doubt about that.
Can we bring custom metrics or custom counters that we may have in like an in-house build app into this?
Yeah, so you can basically create those. Yeah, so there's a couple ways you can do it. We have a wizard where you can go and like scan the system for any processes that are running, and then you can just choose what you want out of that. Or we can even do it through our real-time process explorer that we have. So you just bring up the real-time process explorer that's collecting data through WMI, and it'll see those processes, and you can just choose what you want. Or you can explicitly put in performance counters.
Okay.
Or you
and
can
it'll
drop a
actually pull
script
that
in.
out. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
you can do PowerShell scripts, VB scripts. Even if if you've got Unix systems, you can do other things as well with like Perl. And
Baseline aside, is there intelligence in the application to determine what a standard load on a box is, and then it'll create dynamic thresholds that will grow and shrink based upon that? Your system has 100 users connected every single day at a certain, it's running at 8% CPU with 20% memory, and then one day it spikes up. Does it detect that, or did I have to go in there and explicitly say, establish a baseline on this at what I imagine the baseline to be?
We do have you currently set up the baseline explicitly.
Okay, because I asked because VCOPS, like out of box, it'll grow and shrink, and it's focused just on virtualization, but I care about virtualization here at Virtualization Field Day 4. And thus,
Indeed.
those are the things that usually matter to me most, which is I don't actually have to care what the things are doing. You figure it out, and then when things start to go out of bounds, you tell me. When something is extremely low, something could be down or broken.
Right.
I've seen that happen.
Yep.
When it goes high, that happens all the time as well.
Right. So this is where I would go. So I went in. So basically, if you guys were kind of watching, I went into the actual template that contains the different components, the different monitors, if you will. And basically, you can see there's scripts in the back end of some of these things. But basically, we can go in here and we can say use threshold. We can say use the baseline, right? So in this case, we can tell it, explicitly, hey, go use the baseline for this, and then we can actually set up the alerts based upon that baseline. So you do have to explicitly go in and turn it on, essentially, for each component or each one. But then the neat thing about this is that templates can be applied to multiple systems. So if you have multiple active, AD servers, right? You can say, I'm going to apply this to all, 10 of my AD servers, and this entire template, every change that you made will be applied to everything. So, we do try to make it as easy as possible, so you're not having
a good select all. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because when you've got a little environment with, 10 or 100,000 machines or servers or devices you're monitoring, I don't even want to do the first time clicking. But I'll do the one time, but I don't want to do it twice.
Yeah. And that's why we can do things at the template layer. If you want to do an individual one, you certainly can do a one-off if you like, but we do give you that capability to do it, kind of overall.
So after all your data is rolled up and summarized, is there a way to go back in time to where you had an anomaly or an incident happen between 10 and 10:30, I need to go back, everything's already rolled up? Can you? So
basically, as long as if you're trying to look for raw data, maybe those individual 2-minute data points or 5-minute data points, as long as we're within that roll-up period, we absolutely can go look at that data. We can absolutely go and view a chart that's within a certain time range. That's not a problem.
So question on that, very, very specifically, let's say I want to look at stuff that occurred between a certain time frame.
Right.
Kiwi cat syslog. Will it pull that in and allow me to correlate? And if not,
great question.
Will that potentially in the future, because people use that as a syslog data collection tool?
Right. So we can search and do some filters on the syslog data.
I know the company who makes the product. I'm sure they're really cohesive to integrate this solution in.
Sure, yeah. So
this way,
there's syslog. So Orion itself, actually, as part of the Orion box, there's syslog intake capability. So we actually don't need.
You don't actually have to use the other product.
We don't have to use Kiwi actually for that.
Syslog here, so you can see here.
Yeah, that's good. That's good because I know a lot of people use that separately, even though they have Orion. I don't know why, but I'm saying that I know that they do.
It's usually for database performance, so they put Kiwi in front of the Orion collector, so they can filter through.
Yeah, so you can basically filter on different time ranges here if you wanted to, custom time ranges. So if you're using, sending all your syslog data to the Orion, then we'll capture it that way. So.
In terms of correlating data there between the time series data and the logs.
Yeah, I'm not trying to turn it into Splunk or Log Insight or other things like that, but in a way I am trying to turn it into Splunk and all those other things. Because I'd rather go to one tool than, all right, let me launch my 7 tools and let's figure this out.
Well, at least that way there, it's not, back to your point, it's not figuring out the problem, but I can say, hey, this occurred at this time and there were these events that happened.
Right.
Exactly.
I will tell you that is a high priority for us to get logging data within and the ability to read flat files, especially within the AppStack context too.
Show of hands, how many people in this room have read through hundreds of pages of syslogs to try to solve a problem? And or Windows event logs don't even, at least syslog are easy to read.
You could printed them out with PFY and highlighted.
And we ask not because, for the sole purpose of we have spent that time trying to troubleshoot out problems. I poured over, and I got it down to all right, I'm going to calculate and analyze it within this microsecond of a second to try to figure out what my problem is.
Right.
And I'll do that to solve the problem. But if it's here's your problem, I'm amenable to that also.
Sure.
It's you did the work for me. Yep. Yes. Now I can go back to being smart on other things.
Right.
Let the computer do what the computer's good at.
That's right.
Exactly. We want to reduce the amount of time you guys are going to take to go out there and spend that time reading through logs and all that. Our log event manager Manager does a pretty good job of kind of allowing you to narrow down your field of vision within there and focus on certain things. So it does a great job there.
We're then reading blogs to try to understand what some of the logs are actually referring to.
Right.
And it's even more of a pain in the ass at that point.
Yeah, deciphering logs is not easy, that's for sure.
So at the very least,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
well, at the very least, through the virtualization portion, do we see vCenter events or tasks?
So I believe we are adding those in, I want to say in this next upcoming Q1 release so that you can actually search through those.
Okay.
Because previously I would have to go in, tell it to send the data, this syslog data to here, and then we could set up alerts based upon what was going on. I actually had a situation like that not too long ago with a customer, and we just did it that way. Went to each host and just set it up and sent the data over.
Just from an architectural point of view, obviously the more data you're sticking into Orion, there are scalability issues and concerns. It being one sort of SQL database, I mean, how big do things get? Can you federate it, stick them together? What sort of ways, shapes, and means can you scale this out?
Right. So, in essence, we are actually looking at even improving our scalability for one server itself. But typically, the way we handle the scalability itself is that we'll have the main Orion collector or polling engine, which is kind of running on the main application server. And then what we'll do is, for scalability purposes, we'll deploy what we call additional polling engines. All right, so those can handle additional components, additional servers, additional network devices, interfaces, and such to be able to pull that data in, and it all does go back to the same SQL database. Beyond that, if we want to, if we reach, let's say, our threshold or what we feel is our threshold within one server, then what we'll do is we'll utilize our enterprise operations console and pull a lot of the views themselves together. That's typically how we handle large enterprises today, or a distributed model. Maybe if someone's got things like across the globe, we may have separate instances.
In a large enterprise or whatever, large sort of company, you may have an Orion-based system in each geographic zone,
Right.
3 around the world, but you do have an enterprise
Operations console.
operations console. Sorry,
Right.
It rolls them up, basically, it federates all of those.
So that federates the views of AppStack.
Right.
It will.
It will, yeah.
Yeah.
Makes like an open
in the
AppStack.
future.
Are you thinking of just making a query system that would keep me out of SQL to try to find problems? So I hate going into SQL because I'm not a DBA, but sometimes I want to pull data out of it.
Right.
Some kind of simplified query.
Might be the API.
So our,
SDK that you can use.
so our API is a SQL front end to it. So it's got its own SQL derived language that basically has constructs that are higher level than SQLs, that you don't have to know that it's a left join that you have to do or inner join. You basically just say, give me all the apps that are running on this node. You do a select, nodes.applications, from the applications or nodes table, and then basically you'll get everything that you need.
That's
basically.
not in the UI. That's something I have to put into my.
Yeah, we've talked about providing some type of front end for SQL and for our API directly inside the UI that maybe just admins or something like that could use. I think that's something that we should still look at is providing that capability directly within the UI. We've kind of been a little bit scared of putting a search box, because I think Splunk did that, and I think for a long time it was kind of difficult to actually kind of get your way around that. But I think there's a set of use cases that are could benefit from that.
I don't go into Visual Studio that often to do API work.
Yeah.
But I also don't like drop downs a lot. That's kind of what the focus of my question was.
But, Julian, going back to your question about performance and scale, SQL obviously has its limitations. So one of the things that we did if you have the network component for the NetFlow analyzer, which is obviously collecting and processing tons and tons of data depending on your devices and what they're sending, we actually broke that out of the SQL database, or I guess for the most part we did, to a FastBits database. And so performance enhancements, we're continuing to do that and optimizing our queries. So as we, insert large amounts of data, that those improvements are being made.
Yeah. Okay. We're constantly doing scalability testing.
Yep.
So are there any UI type improvements? I'll give you a perfect example. When I was working in a small active war zone in Southwest Asia, I would have to use Virtualization Manager to try to troubleshoot MVCops, to try to troubleshoot problems of our SolarWinds Orion's environment, because we would have to do IIS recycles every 4 hours. or else we would lose the page. And I'm wondering, does it spawn each of these things off as separate instances, maybe not within the same IIS farm because of those type of problems I'm talking about there, but are there improvements in UI type performance? So when I have the monitor of monitors, this master console that I'm going to, I don't have to constantly be troubleshooting the monitor of monitors using the monitoring tools to monitor that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have the additional web engine where you can essentially, I don't know if you're familiar with that, where you can break off the iOS that allows for some load balancing there.
Okay.
Yeah, so with each release, there is always a certain amount of time that we spend on perf. I don't know exactly what the ratio was this time for this. I know that we know that we have a lot more data to deal with for AppStack, so I know that some additional testing has been done to actually make sure that when those 4 products are installed together, that you have a good experience. No, does that mean that we've solved all the problem? Certainly not. And we know that our UI, and that's part of that UI rework that we are doing is also to move towards more of a model where we use more single page app in the browser instead of constantly having to go back to the browser for just the basic pages and the widgets. So we are going to make more progress on that front, I would say in 2015 that we've ever done over the past probably 4 or 5 years. But, this release still, has some improvements compared to what was before.
So is there a native element where it's monitoring its own health? I mean, I'll just leave that because that was a question from the community, but it truly is. Or do we have to, it dives down into certain parts in order to determine what the application health of the environment is?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, I don't believe we have a built-in mechanism to monitor that. However, we could use our App Insight for IIS or App Insight for SQL
unless it's down,
and monitor ourselves.
You can have another instance.
Another instance to monitor the instance. We could do that.
This is within instances.
Yes. So we potentially could do that. It's definitely a good point. I mean, we do have it in some of the other products, like Virtualization Manager has that in the settings page. Storage Manager has that in its own page as well. So, I mean, it definitely isn't far-fetched from us, kind of doing that in the future.
And especially when it's very important to ensure that the connectivity links, systems, operations. I mean, mission critical meant a lot different things to me than it did to other people.
There's some basic metrics in the admin pages. You can actually see how far behind if your polling is up to date. So if your polling is on time, then you're going to see it there, or otherwise you're going to see if you've got a latency of a few minutes, then you have a problem. Now, it would be nice to actually have a much deeper detailed view of where's the problem.
Strangely, in my cases, when it came to the SolarWinds products, you would think by default, it's got to probably be a SQL problem. SQL, storage, something with the application. No. Everything, CPU, memory, everything was fine.
Right.
Some type of weird IIS problem that couldn't exactly be correlated because we lacked a good correlation engine to determine exactly what it was, and it was application related. Because when everything is baselined, everything is running fine, nothing is spiking, and your performance is horrible, I got it.
Did you have a lot of?
That's why I was reading event logs.
Sure.
Yay!
Did you have a lot of users on that system?
Let's just say we had aggressive users for very specific functions, but even with very few users, it's right. You would think, if the user count went up, that would actually drive up utilization of other resources. But when that doesn't go up, it makes troubleshooting a lot harder.
Because we had seen, because the software that we run on the demo that is available online, oriondemo.solarwinds.com is the same bits that we ship, for the regular product. And there, that environment has the characteristics where you end up with a lot of concurrent sessions at the same time. And over time, we've had bugs there in the API server. Actually, we had bugs where the sessions were not released fast enough, and basically the IIS server was running out of memory. So maybe that was what you guys were running into.
Yeah, our NPM environment was pulling, 100,000 devices on a regular basis.
Yeah.
So I just want to ask a question, not quite on the demo at all, but just from a sort of business perspective. Obviously, SolarWinds has got a great name out there for being a great network monitoring tool. I would hesitate that most companies in the world probably use SolarWinds as either a simple or complex network monitor. To break into a virtualization monitoring and storage monitoring market, which is extremely crowded, with Microsoft doing their own with SCOM, with VMware doing their own with their vRealize, obviously on a virtual side as well. How are you finding being able to break into those markets? Because we even saw VM Turbo yesterday. They've got a great tool doing monitoring. There are a lot of monitoring products, and people don't want to have 20 monitoring products.
But they should buy one.
That's absolutely what you said.
Yeah, exactly.
Name an AppStack.
To your point, I mean, that's exactly right. People don't want to have these multiple products. So we're talking to these folks every day, and they're either going away from SCOM or they're going away from some other product because it's either too hard to use or someone doesn't know how to use it at all, or they're new to the company and they're used to using something else.
I hate the interface.
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of things that we run into, right? So to your point, really, to break into those markets, people literally want that all-in-one tool, and that's what we're going after, right? We're trying to go after the point where we can say, okay, we can get your network and get your applications, your web, your virtualization, we get your storage, we get it all for you in one place. All the data is more or less kind of linked within the product, so we can go from one network thing to an application thing to a virtual layer, and we can get through all those different layers without having to go and deal with this interface, that interface, that interface. It just makes it a lot easier. So, for us, quite honestly, I feel like it's pretty easy for us to tell that story. And when people actually install it and get to the evaluation stage, I think they see how easy it is to get it running.
But now, are you guys, from an architecture and design and engineering standpoint of that, taking lessons from the past and lessons learned from like HP OpenView and other things where they became that CA and their massive, I don't even want to, just where people try to bring those things together and bring them. It seems like it's coming in a good way where the things you integrate, they're separate but equal and connected, as opposed to we're going to be the mother of all tools that becomes such a pain to use that you're going to hate yourself for doing it.
Right.
Like HP OpenView.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, with some of those other tools, you've got a ton of different servers you have to install. I mean, just all kinds of different management nightmares, right? And with this, I mean, and kind of with the virtualization aspect, we're talking about we're like 75% of the way there of getting everything from virtualization manager, if you will, into this platform, right? Yeah, we have to deploy that virtual appliance, but you know what? That virtual appliance is so easy to install and set up, it's not even funny. So, we are making sure that as we kind of implement these different features and start putting more and more data in here, that we're testing these things out, I would say, kind of on a larger scale. At least, kind of doing the simulations and making sure that we do have that kind of data available to us so we know how it impacts our users.
Feedback like export to PDF should be relevant, and stuff like that.
It's top of the list now, so
Really
it's good.
noted.
But I think that, to go back to
export the CSV out there next.
Yeah, to go back to your question also, I think the other part is for us to, and I forgot my train of thought now. What was your question? No, not export to PDF. No.
That's what's on its head right now.
How are we?
Yeah, just so that we're not basically throwing.
Oh yeah, so but I think another part, and it goes back to a question we had earlier about, how does the API kind of interact with other products, for instance. I think one of the realization is that, people are using other products also. What they need is typically one single pane of glass, to call it, what it is, where they can at least bubble up information that is in context, even if whether it's been collected by us or not, they still need to be able to see that in there. And I think that's an evolution also of how we've looked at Orion and the platform, and in general the products is, look, there's a lot of config management stuff that lives in Puppet and Chef. Wouldn't it be great if you could actually, overlay that type of data within the product?
I think we would all agree, except we won't say the word DevOps, but...
Yeah. So, but the point is that, we will never, unless we buy Puppet and Chef and all of that and become them, it just doesn't make any sense. So we need to be able to kind of get to those repository of data and basically kind of get that integrated into our product without us necessarily having to own all the data gathering parts. And so
let me take you to the next stage where I've been working at a lot lately is I'm deploying platforms in Azure. And I'd love to see something like this as an app inside of Azure, because New Relic is in there.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they can monitor, IIS performance. It's a couple clicks.
Right.
But they don't have any on-prem to speak of other than just monitoring VMs going up and down.
Yeah.
So what's your cloud story again? I think you covered it briefly earlier.
Yeah, so I think it's a little bit wider than just the discussion that we have here. But basically, we are starting from two ends. We are starting on the cloud right now. our message is right now hybrid IT is the world that we are living in. There's going to be a bunch of resource on-prem. There's going to be a bunch of resource living in private clouds or in public clouds.
Right.
It's just the world that we're going to live in for the next 5 to 10 years. Those things are not going to go away. On-premise is just not going to disappear because the cloud vendors are there. But what we're doing is we're starting from two endpoints. We're starting first with the big part of the business that we have right now is the on-premises business, what we're talking about right now. We know that we need to inject cloud awareness within that offering. What does that mean? That means that every single one of those products that is up there, network, application and server, virtualization, they all need to be infused with cloud, concepts. That means that a networking product should be able to understand what a VPC is for an AWS stuff, or a way to connect to Azure and their representation of networks. It means that the server and application monitor need to understand applications that are running maybe on the PaaS, a platform from Azure, or maybe the Beanstalk from AWS, those type of things. Storage needs to understand what S3 is, what the blob storage in Azure is. On the other hand, what we have is we start from things like Pingdom, which are properties that are cloud and living, and providing a SaaS version. They need to be exposed to on-premises world because, again, we are living in hybrid IT. And so what you'll see is overall those two trains, they run in parallel. They don't kind of really intersect right now. But they'll end up in a place where, you're going to have a lot of on-prem infused concepts that will bubble up into our, cloud-based product. And you'll have a lot of cloud concepts infused into our own premises, and that's what I have. I have teams really kind of working on my organization doesn't work directly. I'm not responsible for all the engineering work that's happening. I've got teams that are working more on, forward-looking stuff, like I want to call labs, teams. That's what we are looking at, is how do we bring the cloud within the rest of the product and make them relevant into the world where we live into a hybrid IT environment, so that when I fire up, App Insight, not only does it speak to me in terms of my on-premise concept, but also if I'm an AWS customer, I see things that relate to me in terms of what I'm used to. It's AMIs, it's ELBs, it's things like that, S3, and all of those concepts are up there.
Yep.
Yeah, because it's a challenge when you're doing PaaS stuff.
Yep.
Everything below the platform is now abstracted from you too. You don't know what AWS infrastructure or Azure infrastructure is running your stuff.
That's correct. Yep.
So that's a challenge.
I do, but
Do you have also, obviously having a tool that rules them all means you can't be the best at everything. So there are obviously DBAs and storage guys and Exchange people have tools that are built solely for their tools, and they're probably the best you can get. How do you try and sell against that? Or just what are your thoughts from a business point of view? How are you trying to sell against tools where, by doing so many different things, you can't be the best in all of them?
do you know of a good tool for any of those things you just said? Other than SCOM, I don't think there's any really actual good tool. Yeah, it's not manual queries.
There are a lot of database tools that are
okay.
So, to me, yes, there are tools out there, right, that, specific for Exchange, specific for SQL. But I think what we do to set ourselves apart is that, one, we listen to our customers and what they really need. Mm-hmm. So what we try to do is we really try to make sure that we put those important things into the product so that it's the things that are like more high priority, right, for them, versus all of the other things that maybe, again, maybe just be noise for them when it comes to maybe troubleshooting something.
So another hook that we typically get is, yes, SCOM provides additional layers that we're not able to necessarily with App Insight for SQL or IS or Exchange, but what they're not able to do, they don't have the breadth that we do on the networking side.
No.
Right? And so we're able to combine those two together and say, okay, yes, you have, extensibility into these applications, but you also have an understanding of the actual underlying network infrastructure, what's going on there. And so that's a big thing, even if you are a systems administrator, right?
So the benefit of your product is that a router can have 25% packet loss. Mm-hmm. An application is running slow.
Right.
A SCOM would say, there's maybe a network issue, or I'm having timeouts. You can tell that router has got 25% packet loss because it's running at 100% CPU. And so is that the kind of thing you're talking about from a network point of view.
Yeah, yes, exactly. So from packet loss, obviously the response time, analyzing the flow traffic, understanding all of those quality CBQoS, understanding how classification is affecting those applications.
Visibility.
So yeah, you get all of that visibility.
I've stood up SCOM instances, and yeah, you can't do NetFlow with SCOM.
Yeah, no.
At least not with any plugins I've found or management packs. You can do SNMP traps, but that's the extent of it.
No, it's just interesting to hear because I think there are so many different monitoring products, and even HP would say, oh, we can monitor everything, and SolarWinds is obviously saying that kind of thing, but that isn't ever true.
Right.
But obviously in a connected world, particularly cloud, it's not as though the network is to blame, but the network is the thing that's tying everything together. And as a historical network monitoring and management company, obviously you've got years of insight into that.
Yeah, I think that's where this comes into.
There's a set of features there that are more around, kind of the networking between, this building, for instance, and Salesforce.com. You need to have visibility there about, the hop by hop analysis of where it's going, because if you've got a problem, the first thing you need to be able to tell is whether it's Salesforce.com problem or is it your problem or is it your network provider's problem. And so there's a set of technologies there that, are going to come up that basically will provide you visibility on that kind of network path in between you and your SaaS provider.
So just to tie off on that as well, they're two different customers as well. So like your DBAs want those tools because they're doing DBA type things. Yep. So presumably you have DBAs because you need those things to be done. Whereas this is more for the overview of running all of the infrastructure. Now, if you get to a point where you don't actually need DBAs, you won't need those tools. Mm-hmm. You can just go with something simple like this that just runs all of that and automates everything, and it just auto load balances, And I would also like a pony.
Really love to not have DBAs.
Yeah.
That's true.
But until then, you can have both. So you can buy something like this that is for your operations and your IT generalists to be able to do. Look, I need to understand the broad overview of things. But if I then go down to it's definitely something with the database, you can point them at that, and then they can drill into it in more detail.
Mm-hmm. Right. Exactly, and to that point, that would be where we kind of jump into our database performance analyzer, and a lot of DBAs use our database performance analyzer for that particular purpose, right? Because they want to get down to that, that query level to understand what's going on. So.
Yeah, and then they still have the choice. Like, you don't actually want to have something with deep hooks into everything because for some places they don't care.
Right.
They don't need to know any of that stuff.
Yep.
I think there's one more point because you compared us, or we're trying to compare us to CA and those other guys there. I think that one of the things that we've always been very clear about is our products are designed to kind of solve 80% of the problems, and the 20% that are out there that basically the big four will fight really heavily to actually kind of get done by using custom development and all that. That is not of interest for us because at that point, the products that we have developed become something that we didn't design originally. It's almost like, somebody has, created this analogy of a 3-arm sweater, basically, where, we build 2-arm sweaters because that's what 80% of or 99% of the population needs. When you look at some of those big four, they will end up building a 3-arm sweater because at one point or another, one of those big customers has asked them to have a 3rd arm in their sweater. And I think that's where we kind of try to stay away from that. It's been something that we've always said, there's no customer that is bigger than the model, and it's something that honestly has been true for us since I've been here for the past 8 years and even for the 7 years before that. We've never had a customer dictate us things that would make the products that we are building something that they were not designed to be.
So in a way, I think correctly, you're not saying you're going to replace everybody else's monitoring, but as Justin says, having that great overview means when something happens, you can at least point the issue to the SAP application server, and then the SAP guys could potentially go and use their super targeted tool to go and do that. But at least that overall picture is what you're going to provide.
And you can extend with the API, which is pretty awesome. I don't even know, I really do wish there was an ecosystem around this of people who are just like, I want to write awesome things for this, because I really, I tweeted joking earlier, but I'd love to see something that takes the intelligence of like one of the things we saw yesterday, right, with VM Turbo, that has basically this incredible intelligence engine that does nothing except decide what is wrong from all of these peripheral things, and apply that to the model you guys are building, because it's amazing.
It's a good thing there's not like a verbose thwack type community for these people to come together and communicate about this.
If only there were something like that. Thwack.
Can you show the permissions that are built in here? So if I want to provide my
Roles-based?
DBA, yeah.
Relax.
Oh yeah, so role-based access control. Yeah, so I'm going to go into my own lab system because I don't have access to the admin settings on the other one.
You've been locked out. See, that's how roles-based. He's not even allowed in.
Well, it's secure, right? So it's good.
It's very secure.
No, it's still
yeah,
it's on. It's not secure.
Yeah, so basically we can go into the manage accounts section here, in the user accounts, and then I can just go and, basically manage one of these other ones. I'll just go ahead and click his. I won't change anything because he probably is using it. He might be, yeah, I know.
Let's test and see how secure this really is.
Right, so we can add account limitations here. Right now we don't have any account limitations, but we also have view limitations as well, or default views that people can go to or set them up for. So if I add a limitation, which I won't, but I'll just show you guys. I mean, there's a lot of granularity in here. So a single network node, maybe a group of nodes, maybe that I only want folks to look at. Beyond that, if we're talking about maybe applications, I only want them to see a specific application or group of applications.
If you created custom menu bars, you can assign those to
Yes.
people.
Absolutely.
So like those DBAs, you say, this is what you see. And that way they're not seeing stuff that they're going to be like, what about that? That has nothing to do with your job.
And that's the whole point of it, yes.
Is it hook into AD then, to put in the users and you can
Yes, so we can hook into AD, and you can allow it to essentially use AD groups to filter as well. So you just basically use that user within the product to do it. So
The Active Directory Application Monitor, does it have a breakdown specifically for DNS type things in there, or is that like a separate thing entirely?
So we can do the
using
performance. We can do like performance counters and services like that, but we also have our IP address management solution that allows us to go and kind of manage DNS and look at DNS that way.
Stuff you've got?
Yeah, exactly. I don't have that in this particular demo. Actually, you know what? I might have. Yeah,
there's
so
IPAM.
there's a little bit here. I don't know that I have it set up.
I mean, back in your other view where you had your applications view where you have Active Directory up there at the top.
Right.
The ability to see the visibility, and primarily because DNS problems are part of Active Directory, but they are the cause of Active Directory problems.
Yeah, exactly.
You can
And
yeah, so
I want
there's
to know how long
probably
it takes my
there's probably a
users to log
template
in.
for that actually if I go look at it.
DNS components.
Yeah.
Or DHCP, which is not tagged in there, but that's another
If they're in
huge
here.
item
So like
that
DNS
is
server,
fine until
let's
it's
see if there's
not
anything
fine.
else.
Early warnings.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
You're running out of
So
pools.
I just want to see if they're in this demo currently right now.
Just scroll down. Windows DNS server right at the scroll down a bit more.
Keep going.
Just
Yeah, so basically we have it here.
Oh, cool.
Sorry. Yeah, so this is the this is the template that contains all the DNS components. So you don't have to build it; it's already in the
The
product.
template's good enough for me. If you don't have DHCP, please add it.
I will see if it's in.
Well,
there
that's part of
specifically.
IPAM.
Yeah, it's part of IPAM, but as far as monitoring is concerned,
As far as monitoring,
yeah.
It shows.
So you're like, hey, this pool is about to run out of IPs.
It does.
My average DHCP environment.
Yeah,
will
that's
have
what IPM
thousands of
does.
pools.
Yeah,
Which are a pain.
exactly. That's our IP address management solution.
I like color.
There's a DHCP counter.
Yeah, there's DHCP counters, but we can also look at the, like you were saying, the IP pools.
Yeah, we don't
and all
want
that stuff
counters as much as we want monitoring, insight, and visibility and intelligence. More than just simply, oh, it's up or down.
Yeah, my scope is running out. So
My scope is running out.
Right, right.
He wants to look at IPAM under the scope percentage full when you look at that.
But in a prettier interface like
Yeah,
this,
and that's-
preferably even prettier, but still in an interface that's like.
I'll just bring the Orion demo up.
You can always
It's
do
quite easy.
IPAM and Active Directory too.
You could take those resources and put it in. Pull up the DHCP and DNS
Say
resources.
if you had that as a tab up there, just like
our
DNS
demo.
is a separate tab, I'm sure people would be like, oh my God, I'm so glad this is now materialized in my product. You wouldn't have people complaining about this functionality existing, is what I'm saying.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Got
You
it.
guys can start talking in FQDN rather than IP addresses.
Me. I thought
No one's ever going to do
one
that.
of the screens you had it on there.
Yeah, there's some other screens. So my other, I don't have it configured in my lab.
It's right there.
it's here, but I don't have it configured. So that's, we can see here, you can say add subnets, IP addresses, percent of IP address used, scopes by utilization. You can search for IP addresses in here as well.
It's a completely different view, though. I mean, it's it's that kind of I'm used to this dashboard. Now I have to go into this archaic interface. I'm not calling it out in any way. Just saying it's there's no pretty bubbles.
Part of the UI
Do you want
feedback group.
blinky lights?
We want blinky lights because that's what people want. They want to be able to have this up on a map that shows all of their locations.
Exactly.
And they want to be able to see a blinky light go off and saying, "We've got a problem there."
I want to know my.
We can definitely use our network atlas and build some of that stuff.
Would you like it
I wanna
to
see
speak to you too?
replication
Alert,
of
alert, danger, danger.
Danger, Will Robinson.
The machine that goes ping. It tells us your
Sites and services replication is another problem in AD that can really come up and cripple you if you don't know how long it's taking for your sites to replicate to each other.
Absolutely.
I know one of the things just on the agenda was moving to the cloud and all that kind of integration. Obviously, this is all fantastic in a private cloud model with far more stuff going to, be it vCloud hybrid service, to Azure, to Amazon. What does your stuff look like, and how much can it gather? Or how much information and analytics and all the clever stuff you do, but in a public cloud model?
So right now, everything that's inside everything that lives within a VM, can be monitored now, through our server and application product. Can now be, as long as it's running Windows right now. So through our Windows agent, we can basically kind of gather the same amount of information. So whether that VM lives as an AMI in AWS or as a VM role inside Azure, you can drop the agent in that VM. And basically, as long as you have your collector configured properly on-prem to receive the traffic coming back from those agents, they use HTTPS. So basically, you can basically kind of monitor those machines just like they were on-prem. That's kind of where our first step is.
This is where we're at right now.
Yeah.
But the future and hopefully over 2015, as a priority for Server Application Monitor and even Virtualization Manager to leverage the APIs to gather information in Azure and AWS. So it'll be a step process for us, but we are definitely looking at it.
We want to be able to discover if you give us all your credentials that you use, for AWS or Azure, we'll discover which machine you have running on that.
Right.
If it's any piece of the PaaS infrastructure that you have running on that, and then we'll integrate that in there and basically kind of automatically monitor.
There's a lot of networking, storage buckets, all that kind of infrastructure that's viewable. Okay.
Another thing that we're looking at is VM mobility, right? Ability to move from on-premise to a hybrid infrastructure to the public cloud, whether it's going from VMware to Azure or AWS, and so that's something we're investigating right now as well.
Can you use managed service accounts from AD so that I don't have to provision a new AD account that managed?
Absolutely.
So that these are systems, AD makes the account, not me.
You know what? That's a good point. I would need to look into that, see if we can do that or not. I'm not 100%
It'd be a
on that
cool
one.
feature because I'm tired of typing in management accounts and services for services.
Yeah, no, I think today you have to enter them in, but I'll look into that and see if there's any other options for
Any
that.
future thoughts on having this as a SaaS model? So you could SolarWinds in the cloud that can monitor my infrastructure wherever it may be, on-prem.
Yes. Yes, the answer is yes. That we are as I was describing the two trains where we start off on premises and we start in the cloud. Right now, the only thing that we really have in the cloud is Pingdom, but we know that we want to have IT monitoring capabilities offered from the cloud. Now, this doesn't necessarily equate to take this and put it into the cloud. Okay, there's a set of concepts that need to be part of that product that are not in our products right now here, and also those have been built over an infrastructure that is not necessarily the best infrastructure to run in the cloud. But in terms of features, yes, we want to have eventually everything that you see in there, or the things that are relevant into a cloud and hybrid IT, delivered either on-premise or delivered from the cloud.
Any plans for putting this on mobile devices or anything like that? Because a lot of people are moving towards apps. Download and on the go, just look at it as that. something in your roadmap?
But it's kind of interesting because we actually acquired a company called Mobile Admin that actually was our front end for this, and we've had really poor traction with this from an adoption perspective. No, it might be that what we have right now is not what people are looking for, which is always a possibility. But I always thought that the phone itself is the right, kind of medium to actually manage your environment. I think that there are certain tasks that need to be done on the phone where you get called and you need to be able to kind of diagnose quickly something. But tablets are probably more a medium that is more conducive to that. And then I think at that point we have to look at, is it worth for us investing, really building an app for Orion on iOS and then Android and maybe Windows also as an app which runs into that form factor versus investing more on the UI refresh that we are doing here and then making sure that user
UX development in that direction.
that basically is using a set of technologies that make them consumable on a tablet as well.